Hey there neighbors, Kevin here with Etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the B&W companion fifth wheel trailer hitch along with the turnover ball gooseneck hitch for the 2024 Ford F-350. If you're looking to tow not only a fifth wheel trailer but also a gooseneck trailer, the B&W turnover ball hitch is going to be the best option for you. Right now you can see that we have the fifth wheel companion trailer hitch here, which is dropped into our turnover ball hitch, but if we pop this out of here, we can easily just pop in our gooseneck ball, so that way we can switch right over to towing a gooseneck trailer. And then when we're done doing all of our towing, we can pop either the hitch or the gooseneck ball out and have an empty bed so that we have plenty of room for any other stuff that we need to store. Now in terms of capacity, what we can actually haul with our trailer hitch or our gooseneck ball, we're going to have a 20,000 pound gross towing weight capacity with our hitch, along with a 5,000 pound vertical load limit, which is going to be that pin weight. So that's that downward force from the pin box pressing on our trailer hitch. When it comes to our gooseneck ball, it's going to be a 30,000 pound gross towing weight and a 7,500 pound pin weight there. So you just want to double check, make sure you're not overloading either of these, as well as your vehicle. So make sure that you go in there and you check out your owner's manual and figure out what your vehicle is capable of handling and stay within that limit so you're not damaging any of your property. Now there are other options out there when it comes to the companion, just because depending on the bed length, you might not be able to make a full 90-degree turn with the fixed base like we have today. Now this does have a little bit of adjustment when it comes to where we mount our pivot arm, so that can give us a tiny bit more clearance, but if you're in that 6-foot bed range, that's probably not going to be enough for you. You're really going to want to look into the slider base for the companion. That way you can get a full 12 inches of travel back behind the axle, so that way you have more turning clearance and the nose of your trailer is not going to come into contact with the cab of the truck. Now when it comes to hooking up to our trailer, it's super simple. We're just going to pull the pin and clip here on our latch. We'll pull this back, and it'll stay open like this, and then as our kingpin from our pin box comes through, it's going to push on the back side of our jaws here and automatically lock it into place. I'm not as heavy as a trailer, so I can't do that myself, but I can show you by popping it right in there. And then once it's in there, we have a full 360 degrees of contact with our 1-inch thick jaws right here. So we have nothing to worry about. There's no way that this is going to bust through those jaws. We know that we're nice and secure here, and we're not going to be losing our trailer. Now, one thing I do recommend to go along with this is a lube plate. And that's this guy right here. And this just simply pops onto your kingpin and then provides a greaseless way to hook up to your trailer hitch without scratching it all up. Now we don't have that big messy grease pile on here that's collecting dirt and debris, and we aren't scratching it up at all either, so that way the paint's going to last a nice long time. And along with that, I would also recommend either getting a tonneau cover or getting some kind of cover that you can put over here. I know B&W was working on a bag that's going to go and cover the whole companion, but I don't know if that's quite out just yet at the time that we're making this video. I know the last time I talked to them, they said it was still in production, or the production phase, so they're trying to figure out exactly what they need to make it fit each kind of footprint here, just because there's a lot of varying pieces here when it comes to the different OE standard turnover ball and so on. So if you can't get that cover, if it's not available yet, get a tonneau cover. That's going to cover right over the bed here and protect your hitch, because you don't want all that water from the rain or snow getting on here and then rusting your hitch out, and now you're having to spend more money to buy a whole new one. Now when it comes to the paint job, the ride quality, everything about this, B&W is the cream of the crop when it comes to fifth wheel hitches. Now if there's starting to be some scrapes up here because you're not using a lube plate, definitely go ahead and make sure that you're kind of covering over that, making sure that you're preventing any other kind of rust or corrosion. If you really need a little bit of extra paint, you can reach back out to B&W and they'd be happy to send some out to you so you can do some touch-up. Now there is a little bit of maintenance, so under our hitch head here, so if we pull out these pins right here, there will be 2 polyurethane bushings that sit right here in our saddles, and we're going to need to fill those up with a little bit of lube every now and then. In your booklet that's going to come with your fifth wheel hitch, if you turn through it a couple of pages, you're going to find that lubrication packet right taped inside of there. So you can pop that right out, spray a little bit on there, or rub a little bit on there, smear it around, and then you can just drop your hitch right in And this isn't something where you're going to have to constantly do it because it is protected by the saddles here from our fifth wheel hitch head. So it's not like you have to do it every single time you go out, but it's a nice thing to check every once in a while. Maybe if you're only doing 1 or 2 camping trips a month, once a month is probably enough for you. Now, if this is sitting out in the rain and getting rained on or snowed on, any of that, maybe check it a little bit more often. Make sure that you're not ruining your investment here. Now, in terms of installation, gooseneck, underbed gooseneck hitches are typically a little bit of a challenge. This one, honestly, was pretty easy out of all the ones I've really done. The hardest part, honestly, for me was when we got to the point where we had to torque stuff down. I had to use a second set of hands at some points just to hold the other wrench. So when I'm torquing down on the nut, I had to have somebody hold the wrench for the bolt head itself, just because it's a little bit hard and there's some tight spaces in here. So you're going to need some extensions. You might even need a swivel adapter so that you can get onto each one of these bolts and get them all torqued down. That being said, like I said before, this was one of the easier ones when it came to the actual installation of that. Fifth wheel hitch, obviously going together pretty easy. A lot of this is already kind of put together in the box, but there is a little bit of assembly for you. Aside from that, the biggest challenge I really had was the hat channel was in the way for our safety chain loops, so that I could not just do a pilot hole up through the bottom and then drill down to finish it out. I had to sit there and grind it all the way out. And there's 2 plates here, so we have our bed that you see right up here, and then there's a second plate that's under it. So there's a little bit of a gap between those 2 plates, so drilling through it and then grinding through it just took about 2 hours for me, just because be really careful that we're not getting a little bit too far, and we really had to kind of watch out where we were going because we didn't have that pilot hole. So you might run into that yourself, but I think that might be a bed length issue. So maybe if you don't have the 8-foot bed, you might not have the hat channel exactly where we had it in our situation here. So if this is something you feel like is just going to be a bit too much for you, please feel free to use our dealer locator, and you can enter in your zip code to find a shop near you to get it professionally installed. If you're planning on doing this yourself, then stick around and I'll walk you through the process. Starting off our install, we're going to be measuring from the end of our bed into where we're going to be drilling out our hole for our gooseneck hitch. And for this one, since we have an 8-foot bed, we're going to be going to 45 3/4 inches, which comes right out where they've already put a dimple in our bed. So already got some of the work done for us. Now, if you do have a spray-in liner and that overlaps on the edge of the bed here, you're going to need to add that in because that's going to have it sit a little bit further out. So you're going to want to add about a 1/16 of an inch on to your measurement to account for that. Now, I'm going to widen this dimple up just a bit more with my center punch, and then we can drill through. Now we'll take our 4-inch hole saw and drill through our bed. Once we drill through, we can vacuum this all up, and then we're going to come back with a file and just clean up the edges here because there's going to be a lot of little burrs that we don't want to get stuck on or have it accidentally scratch us with. And then once you have it all filed down, come back with your paint marker, whether that's colored or just a clear coat, and just cover up any exposed metal so that way you don't have any risk of corrosion. Next, we're going to be lowering our exhaust bracket here just because this is a diesel, and if you have a diesel model, you are going to have to lower that a bit. There's a couple brackets and carriage bolts. They're 1/4-inch carriage bolts and lock flange nuts there. And we are going to pop out the 2 bolts that are here and on the other side as well. And for that, we're going to need a 10mm socket and also probably at least a 6-inch extension. That way, on the other side, you can get to it over the leaf spring pack. I've also put up a cam strap to hold up my our exhaust here, just because once we drop that, there's going to be nothing holding it. And we're going to be reusing these bolts, so just set them aside for right now. So I was a little worried about this, but honestly the isolators in the back are holding it up a whole lot better than I thought they would. So we can take our strap down because we're actually going to have to pull down just a bit on our exhaust here because we want to lower this down. So the 2 holes that we have here, the top hole is going to now be going into that bottom space that we have on here our bracket is going to be essentially coming down like this to where that square portion is going to be below our frame rail, and we'll have that carriage bolt come through and bolt into it, and then the 2 bolts that we removed are going to be back into those 2 holes, but now also going through this bracket. And then we'll do the same exact thing on the other side as well. So I'm going to pull this down just a bit and get my hardware lined up. That'll also help kind of hold it in place a little bit better. Now with our carriage bolt, they show it in the diagram coming through the round hole on here. The square head of this isn't really thick enough to make it all the way into that square portion there, so I guess it just doesn't matter that they still want it to go this way. So we are going to pop that through on the inside here. And then we'll thread on our flange nut. And start tightening this down just a tiny bit. Not too much, because we still want a little bit of wiggle room on the other side, but as you can see, we're kind of crooked here. I want to kind of even that back out. Now that I got them all in, I'm going to snug each one of these back down. For our carriage bolt, it's going to be a 7/16 socket. And on the other side, honestly, I really just did it from the inside and just kind of felt around. There's 2 holes right here that these inner nuts connect to, and you can kind of see through and just get an eyeball. So I just stood up on my step ladder here. If you're doing this on the ground, it'd be a whole lot easier to just look through too. Or if you can come through the wheel well. With us being up on the lift, they really didn't want to go up and down a million times just to get this in. So just kind of felt over. Now I'm going to get over on the other side and tighten that one down as well. Now for our next step, we're going to be installing the inner plates. Now on some models, they've already welded in inner plates at the factory on the frame rail, which just so happens to be the case for us. So unfortunately, we won't be able to show you how to install these just because we already have some in place welded to the frame. So if that is the case for you, you're going to skip past this step plus step 2, which is to relocate your wiring. That's all up in here because it's already been done for us. As you can see right here, we have this black plate that's welded to the frame. That is our bracket, and we're going to be going through these bolt holes right here. With those inner brackets already being installed, we can now move on to installing our outer brackets. Now when you look at this, there's going to be 2 different stickers. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what side you put them on because they are the same bracket, but realistically, you should be putting the one that has the instructions on how to latch and unlatch the gooseneck ball on your driver's side. So I'm going to put this over on the driver's side, and then we'll run our hardware through to mount it up to our frame. And when we're doing that, we want to make sure that we have it snug enough that it's going to hold it up, but not too snug to where we can't slide this up and down because we still need a little bit of wiggle room so we can get the rest of the hardware through it. All right, we're over on our passenger side now. I'm going to install our outer plate. To do so, we're going to take our 5/8 hardware in a flat washer. I'm going to just slot these right already in, and we're going to match it right up to the holes that are already in our frame rail, right here and here. We'll push that through, and that's going to also go through that inner plate that was already welded to our frame. So now we can get under the vehicle and get the rest of our hardware put on. Now on the inside, we're going to throw on a flat washer, split lock washer, and our nut here, and I'm just going to run this down a bit. Like I said, we don't want to go too tight because we do still need to have our bracket move a bit while we line everything up. And we'll do the same over on this other bolt up here. And just make sure that you do the same exact thing over on your driver's side. Now on the driver's side, it's a little bit harder to get to on the inside just because you got a little bit of excess stuff here in the way. So you'll probably need a pretty long extension. I used a 10-inch extension to get over to that one going towards our cab. And then over here, you just got to kind of pull down this wire harness out of the way, which you can pop right out of here if you need to, but you'll have to cut the zip ties. Now in each one of our cross members, we are going to be putting in one of the threaded bushings. It's got a D shape to it, so there's a flat side on it. There's a flat side on the hole that we're going to be putting this in. Now, you want to make sure that you are putting it in so that this is going to be flush with this side right here. You can see where it's all nice and flat, and over on this side we have more of that cross tube exposed. So we're going to be placing it in just like so with the smaller portion going in. We'll line that up, and you can tap that a little bit with a dead blow just to kind of get it started. But to get the rest of the way in so it's totally flush, what we'll do is we'll take one of our flat washers and our 1/2 inch cap screw, and as you start to tighten this down, it's going to draw that back into there. So we'll tighten that down. And to tighten, I'm using a 3/4 inch socket wrench. All right, now that's nice and tight. We'll back it off. And now when we look at our bushing, it's fully into that hole there and pressed up against our plate. So we're going to do this with all 4 of our cross members. All right, so just as a little display here before we actually stick it up there. So I've stuck up the driver's side rear cross member already, but the big thing here is just making sure that you have that cut out to where it's facing in towards the center here. We want the flat sides facing out towards the front of the cab and towards the rear of the cab with our back ones. So make sure that you have it oriented that way you're putting them in correctly. And then once we go to line this up on the inner cross member, you're going to have a slotted hole that's going to match up with that threaded D-shaped washer that we installed. And then on the outer side, if you put your hand on the outside of the frame rail, you should feel these 2 slotted holes line up with your outer brackets as well. So that way you can tell that you actually have it in the correct spot. So with all that said, I'm going to go put these in and we can keep moving on. All right, I'm going to push it over, and our bolt that we're using has thread locker in it. So you'll see it's got a big cut going down all the threads with that thread locker already in place for us. So it makes it super easy. So we will slide this up, get it kind of lined up here. All right, now that we got it lined up, we're just going to put a few threads in. You'll feel it once it starts to hit that thread locker, and just stop right there. Yep, right there. And we'll do the same for our front cross members as well. Next, we're going to take these carriage bolts that we have in our kit, and we're going to pop these into our cross members and drop them down through the square hole right at the end here, and that's what's going to help us attach to our center section. Next, we're going to grab one of our braces, and this is going to match up on that cab side cross member, and those 2 carriage bolts that we have are going to go right down through here. And we're going to finish that off with some 1/2 inch flat washers, split lock washers, and then a nut here. And we'll get all that in place real quick. We'll get just a couple threads on there, and then we're going to leave it loose because we still got a little bit more to tighten up before we can get to that point. Next, we're going to take another 2 5/8 bolts and 2 flat washers and 2 more nuts. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop these through the cross members and get them so that they are lined up properly. And then we'll tighten these down after we add on the flat washers and nuts on the back side until it has both of these flush with each other. And then once those cross members are flush, then we're going to come on the bottom side and we'll tighten up our 1/2 inch hardware on the bottom there. And then we can take these 5/8 bolts right back out. So while I was tightening up those 5/8 bolts, I was also kind of pushing it up. So the big thing is you will still have a gap between the 2 cross members, but you want them to both be level with each other. And then once you have these tightened down to hold it in that position, you can come back with your 3/4 inch socket and tighten down your 1/2 inch hardware until the lock washer is fully seated. Next, we're going to take our center section. I've already popped out our lever here so that we have a little bit more room to work with, because we're going to be installing a bracket before this goes in. Now this bracket is going to have to sit on it just like so, and take note of the orientation here. So I've got our gooseneck hole right here, kind of more towards me, and the other mounting holes are facing away from me. Now this bracket is going to come on just like this on the bottom, and then our carriage bolts, the 5/16 ones that we have sitting aside, we're going to put that on from the bottom up and tighten that down with the included flange nuts, and then use a 1/2-inch socket wrench to just fully snug those down. So you might want to go kind of back and forth between the two. And finally, we'll torque these two bolts as well. All right, now we're going to flip this around to the other way, so that way we have our handle facing towards the driver's side, and we can position this up into place. Now before you do that, you want to throw a bolt with a flat washer up in the driver's side here. So come back over. We're going to take one of our 5/8 cap screws and a flat washer, and we're going to position this so that it's just level or flush with our cross member here, so that way it's not going to interfere. Once we get that center section muscled up into place, then we can slot that in, and then we can do the exact opposite over on the inside here. So on the passenger side, we're going to be putting in the bolt first, and then on the outside, we're going to be putting on that flat washer, split lock washer, and then nut. On this one, we won't be putting a flat washer in, but we will be using that split lock washer and then the nut. So I'm having a little bit of a difficulty getting this in place just because our wiring's all in the way. I tried popping this one out, but it's just not enough wiggle room with this bracket here and the other wiring that's in place. So I'm going to use a 13mm socket and an extension, and I'm going to just pop this one bolt out, and that'll drop our whole bracket here, so that way we got more room to work with. And then once it's up into place, we can reinstall this bracket. Now for the back screw here, I am going to have to pop out this wire harness just a bit because it's blocking us. So use your trim panel tool, flat screwdriver, something like that. Just kind of poke it through the rest of the way. There we go. The little lip that's on the cross members can also help kind of hold it up for you. But I'm going to need to get back on the other side. But before I do that, I'll just slot one of my bolts through real quick. Push over on the latch. Once we have those two bolts in place, the center section should hold itself up a little bit better, and then we can get the rest of our hardware on. So like I was saying, on the passenger side here, I'm going to use a flat washer, lock washer, and then our nut. On the driver's side here, we're going to have just that lock washer and nut. Now that that's in place, we can grab our other brace, because that's what else we're going to need to help hold up the other section here. And we'll get these lined up a little bit better. Carriage bolts through here to help hold that in place. Both sides here. Make it a little bit easier, so that way we're not having to hold as much of the weight ourselves. There we go. Carriage bolt back down. Flat washer, lock washer. We'll get a couple threads with the nut. Now we're going to tighten up our nuts here until we get that lock washer totally flat. Now with those two snug down, we're gonna put our flat washer, lock washer, and nut on those two 5/8 bolts that we slid into our rear cross members. You don't have to tighten these down just yet. We're just getting them on, so leave a little bit of wiggle room there. Now with the 4 pieces we have, or 4 bolt holes that we have between our cross member brace and then our actual center section here, we're going to have these cap screws we're going to be slotting through from the inside out. And the reason why I told you to leave it kind of loose is, you can see we weren't totally lined up here. So we want to make sure that we get that nice and straight before we actually tighten anything down. Otherwise, you're going to have to just re-loosen it again. Once you have those in, you put a flat washer, lock washer, and then a nut. And we're going to do that for each one of these holes. And I'm not going to fully tighten it down yet. I'm just going to get them in there loosely. And we can come back once everything is in place, so that way we don't have anything binding us up. Next, we're going to take more of our 1/2-inch hardware. We're going to be dropping in our bolts through the top on 3 out of the 4 between our cross member and our outer side plate here. So the first one closest to the cab is going to come down. That second one that's behind it, we need to put the bolt going up, just because there's a hat channel, like cross member piece that's right in that way there, so you really don't have enough room to get it in. So let me show you just what I mean here. All right, so on the bolt head, we're going to have a flat washer. We'll come up on the second one here. That's going to go up, and then we'll have another flat washer and a lock nut. Now with this, you might have to kind of pull that bolt back down just a bit if you don't have enough clearance. There we go, flat washer, lock washer, and then your nut. We're just going to do this loosely for right now too. We're not really fully tightening this down just yet. All right, and for the ones that are coming down, same thing. It's going to be that flat washer on the bolt, another flat washer on the other side of it, lock washer, and a nut. All right, now that I got this last one in, we're going to repeat this same process over on the other side, making sure that that first bolt closest to the cab is down, and then the 2 rear ones are down, and then that second one closest to the cab is facing up with the bolt head. Our next step is going to be fully lifting up our center section so that it's resting against the bottom of our bed. And to do so, there are a few devices out there. B&W does sell a lifting device. So if you plan on doing multiple gooseneck hitches, it might be something worth investing your money into. In our case, we just use 2 jack stands and a pipe and then a ratchet strap. You can do this at home with 2 buckets, 2x4 and another ratchet strap, or another combination of things, or just honestly have someone up here holding it up as well. But the goal is we want this to be completely flat up against the bottom of the bed. So when we go to start tightening down all of our hardware, this is going to be sitting exactly where we need it to. While lifting it up, we already have our center section pretty much centered inside of our hole. We did have to kind of tap it a little bit and move it with a dead blow just to kind of get it to shift over a bit, because we had a little bit more towards the passenger side than the driver's side. But we've got it pretty much where we want it now. So we're going to get these 5/8 bolts that are running through our center section, our cross beams, and our braces. So that's these guys right here, here, and these 2 back here. And we're only snugging them down until the split lock washer right here is totally flat. So we're not actually torquing it just yet. There is a sequence that B&W lists further in our steps that's going to tell us which bolts to go through with our torque wrench. So to get these all tightened down, we're going to be using a 15/16 socket and wrench. Obviously, the ones against the hat channel here, we're going to have to be tightening down on the bolt head versus onto the actual nut itself, just because we don't have any room with the hat channel being in the way. On the center section here, that one at least we can get on the nut, but the other one, same thing, we're going to be on the back side. Actually on that one, both of the ones on the front we can actually get to. Probably. The only thing is you might run into some issues with this latch being in the way, so you might want to switch over to a short well socket. Other than that, we should probably be able to get on the nut instead of the head. So one thing I should have mentioned, when we were talking about alignment, if you look at the little notch here on either side, that's going to match up with the line that's in the bed here with that little plate that they have bolted onto the bottom of the frame here. So you want to make sure that you have those lined up, and that's kind of in the center of that little notch. And if you don't, you can just take a dead blow and kind of whack on it here or back here and get it to move how you need to, and then obviously side to side as well. It's a lot easier to see the side to side when you're up in the bed. For like this part of it, front to back, you can also go off that. So once you have all that good, now we're going to switch back to those black bolts that have the thread locker on it, and we're going to get those snug down as well. Now we're going to be tightening up the 8 bolts, 4 on each side, that we placed between our cross member and our outer side plates. We want to make sure that these are nice and snug, and then we can move on to the next set of bolts. And now, one thing to keep in mind is as you are doing this, just go back and double check your center section, make sure it's still centered, because as you start pulling on some of these bolts, it's going to want to move that center section around. And that's why having that strap up there to help hold it in place is pretty important. So if you can get that nice and tight, it's going to make it a whole lot easier and prevent it from shifting on you. Now for these ones, I'm using a 3/4 inch socket and wrench. Next, we'll snug down the 4 bolts that are running through the frame rail, attaching the inner and outer plates. Now we're going to get these 4 1/2-inch bolts right here, attaching our brace to our center section, and that, once again, that's going to be the 3/4 inch socket and wrench. So our torque sequence is going to be our 5/8 bolts that are right here. Next, we're going to have the 4 1/2-inch bolts that are sitting right here and at the back as well. After that, we are going to switch over to the vertical bolts. So that's these black ones right here that have the thread locker. Once we get past those, we can switch over to the 8 1/2-inch cap screws on the outer side plates. So that's those 4 that are running along the side out here, attaching our cross members to the outside plates. After that, our 5th thing to torque down is going to be our bolts that run through the frame rail. So we're back on those 5/8 bolts again. And then last, we're going to get the 4 1/2-inch cap screws sitting on the bottom of the center section to the cross member braces, which are these 4 right here. Now that we have everything torqued down, we are going to slide in our latch handle. I want to make sure that we have the handle side facing out, so right up over the frame. Once you have the handle lined up, you can slide in your 2 carriage bolts. There you go. And secure them with the flange nuts. And then we'll secure those with a 1/2-inch socket. And these will be torqued as well. Now that we have everything in place, we can put back our wiring harness here. So if you popped any of these out, make sure you push them back into the bracket, and then we have those 2 bolts that are going to match up with our frame here. All right, so I'm noticing that my wiring is now going to interfere with my latch handle, so what we're going to do is just pop these all out, and we'll flip them down to the bottom side of the bracket and then push them right back in. So that way the only thing that's sticking out is the little push pins right here, and that'll give us more than enough clearance for our handle. So now we're going to be drilling out some pilot holes for our safety chain loops, and to do that I'm going to first take my center punch, find the center of our hole from the bottom, and then we're going to drill up. I want to come over a little bit more. The bed here is kind of angled. We're on one of the ribs, so it's kind of hard to get it exactly in the center. I'll do this for each hole, and then I'm going to take an 1/8 inch drill bit and just drill up with that pilot hole, and then we can come back up top and we'll drill down the rest of the way. So unfortunately, with the hat channel being exactly right where we needed to put in our safety chain loops, I wasn't able to get a centered pilot hole on this, so it makes it pretty hard to actually drill straight down from the top like you normally would. So what I had to end up doing was I kind of drilled a couple holes around this area in that same space where this hole is going to sit, and then I drilled out the rest of it with a grinding bit and got it to where we could drop in our safety chain loops. So now that we have those in place, we can go down under the vehicle. We're going to put on those springs that are in your kit along with the nut. That way whenever we pull up on this, those springs are going to want to pull it right back down. So we'll place our springs so that the smaller side is on the bottom here. I'm going to push that up a bit. We're going to get our nut put on, and we're going to tighten these down until they're just flush with the bolt. So we'll get the rest of them on real quick. And we can grab our ratchet and get it tightened down. Once you have your safety chain loops installed with the nuts flush at the bottom there of the bolt, that'll do it for the install portion of this. The only thing left you have to do is just drop in either your gooseneck ball or your companion 5th wheel hitch, and you're all ready to tow. Well, that's going to do it for our look at and installation of the B&W companion 5th wheel trailer hitch, along with the turnoverball underbed gooseneck hitch here in our 2024 Ford F-350. My name's Kevin, and if you still have some questions about what's going to be the right underbed gooseneck and 5th wheel hitch combo for your F-350, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.